Young ballerina Monica joins a prestigious academy to fulfill her dream, but soon faces unexpected challenges. What is hidden behind the closed doors of the lessons? And why are her parents so angry and ready to fight for her future? Will Monica be able to overcome these trials and find her way to success? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what you would do if you were in Monica's parents' shoes. Monica stood at the entrance of the prestigious ballet academy, clutching her bag tightly, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. At 8 years old, the young African-American girl was about to step into a world she had only dreamed of. Her parents, Sarah and Michael, were right beside her, beaming with pride and encouragement. They had always supported her passion for ballet, and now, as she entered this new chapter in her life, they wanted her to know they were with her every step of the way. "Remember, sweetheart, you're here because you're talented," Sarah said, kneeling down to meet her daughter's eyes. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Michael, standing tall beside them, nodded in agreement. "You've worked so hard to get here, Monica. We believe in you, and we know you're going to shine." Monica nodded, forcing a small smile onto her lips, but inside, a swirl of anxiety mixed with excitement. She had heard stories about the academy's strict regimen and high standards, and she wanted nothing more than to prove herself worthy. But as she glanced around at the other students, most of whom were already practicing in groups or warming up with impressive grace, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider. The hallways were filled with a flurry of activity as students, both new and returning, hurried to their classes. As Monica took her first steps into the academy, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning towards her, assessing, judging. She kept her head high, remembering her mother's words, but the nerves were starting to creep in. Their first stop was the reception desk, where a stern-looking woman handed them a schedule and pointed them towards Monica's first class. "You're in Group C," she said curtly, barely glancing up. "Your instructor is Mr. Walters. He's in the main hall." The name struck a chord of anxiety in Monica. She had heard of Mr. Walters, a tall, imposing figure, known for his strict, almost militaristic approach to ballet. Some said he was the best in the field. Others whispered about his favoritism and his disdain for anyone he deemed unworthy of his time. As they made their way to the main hall, Monica's stomach twisted into knots. She could hear the stern voice of Mr. Walters echoing through the halls even before they reached the room. She peeked inside and saw him towering over a group of students, barking instructions and corrections. He was tall, with sharp features and a piercing gaze that seemed to see right through everyone. His presence commanded attention and fear in equal measure. "Focus, people," he snapped at the students who were desperately trying to keep up with his rapid-fire instructions. "If you want to be here, then act like it." Monica took a deep breath and stepped inside, her parents following close behind. Mr. Walters turned his icy blue eyes toward them, and for a moment, the room fell silent. "New student?" he asked, his tone flat but assessing. "Yes, sir," Monica managed to reply, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Monica." He looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slight narrowing of his eyes, he motioned her toward the back of the room. "Find a spot and watch for now. Let's see if you can keep up." Monica felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she nodded and did as she was told. As she moved towards the back, she could feel the stares of the other students on her. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with a hint of judgment. She bit her lip and tried to focus on the instructions, determined not to let the tension get to her. As the class progressed, it became clear that Mr. Walters had little patience for Monica. Every time she tried to follow along with the group, He would single her out, making her perform difficult moves repeatedly while critiquing her every flaw. "That's not how you do it," he'd snap. "Your posture is all wrong." Again, the other students, some of them whispering and exchanging looks, seemed to pick up on his disdain. Monica could feel the isolation setting in, the invisible wall forming between her and the rest of the class. She fought to hold back tears, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. During a brief break, she overheard some of the other students whispering about her. "Did you see how Mr. Walters looked at her?" one girl murmured. "It's like he doesn't even want her here." "Maybe she's just not good enough," another voice chimed in. Monica tried to block out their words, focusing instead on her mother's voice in her head, telling her to stay strong. But it was becoming harder and harder to ignore the feeling that she didn't belong. After the class, Monica's parents were waiting for her outside. Sarah noticed the look on her daughter's face and knelt down to her level. "How was it, sweetie?" "It was okay," Monica lied, her voice trembling slightly. She didn't want to worry them. She didn't want them to think she wasn't strong enough to handle it. But deep down, she felt the sting of Mr. Walters' harsh words and the weight of the other students' judgment. She knew this was just the beginning, and she wasn't sure how much more she could take. The next few weeks at the Ballet Academy were a blur of intense training sessions and rising tension. Each class with Mr. Walters became a new test of Monica's resolve. His disdain for her was becoming more evident, and it seemed like every other student in the class was picking up on it. During one particularly grueling class, Mr. Walters singled her out once again. "Monica," he barked, pointing a long finger at her. "Front and center, show us your pirouette." Monica's heart pounded in her chest. She had practiced this move 1,000 times, but under Mr. Walters' cold stare, her nerves took over. She stepped forward, spun, and stumbled slightly on the landing. Mr. Walters scoffed loudly. "Pathetic," he declared for everyone to hear. "You call that a pirouette? You'll never make it here if you can't even master the basics." A few students snickered, and Monica felt her face flush with embarrassment. She could feel the tears welling up, but she swallowed them down, determined not to cry in front of everyone. "Again," he ordered, crossing his arms and tapping his foot impatiently. Monica tried again, and this time she completed the spin without stumbling, but Mr. Walters only gave a slight dismissive nod before moving on, his face showing no sign of approval. "Barely acceptable," he muttered, "and that's being generous." The whispered comments from her classmates continued to chip away at Monica's confidence. Lily, one of the few girls who seemed kind, tried to offer a small smile of encouragement, but she, too, was afraid to speak out loud against Mr. Walters. No one wanted to become his next target. One afternoon, after yet another humiliating critique from Mr. Walters, Monica escaped to the bathroom during a break. She locked herself in a stall, tears streaming down her face. She felt trapped, like she was stuck in a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. She heard the bathroom door open and the sound of someone's footsteps approaching. It was Lily. "Monica, are you okay?" she asked softly. "I saw what happened. He was really harsh." Monica wiped her tears and tried to steady her voice. "I'm fine," she lied. "I just need a minute." Lily hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You know, you don't deserve this. He's been really unfair to you. It's not because you're not good enough." Monica remained silent, her heart heavy with doubt. She wanted to believe Lily, but every word Mr. Walters hurled at her chipped away at her self-worth. Days turned into weeks, and the situation only got worse. Mr. Walters continued to humiliate Monica in front of the class. During a particularly difficult session, he forced her to repeat the same series of movements over and over again until she was on the verge of collapsing. "Again," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. "Do it right, or don't do it at all." Monica's legs were trembling, her muscles screaming in pain, but she pushed herself to try once more. As she attempted the move again, her vision blurred with exhaustion, and she stumbled, falling to the floor. "Get up," Mr. Walters barked. "If you can't handle it, maybe you don't belong here." This time, the tears came, hot and fast. Monica couldn't hold them back any longer. She picked herself up off the floor and ran out of the hall, ignoring the whispers and stares of the other students. She found refuge in an empty corner of the academy, curling up and hugging her knees to her chest. She felt small, broken, and defeated. All she had ever wanted was to dance, to feel the music move through her and bring joy to herself and others. But here, under Mr. Walters' gaze, she felt like she was drowning. A few minutes later, Lily found her. "Monica," she said gently, sitting down next to her. "This isn't right. You have to tell someone, your parents maybe. They need to know what's happening." Monica shook her head. "I don't want them to think I'm weak. I don't want them to be disappointed in me." "They won't be disappointed," Lily insisted. "They love you, and they'll want to help you. You shouldn't have to go through this alone." That night, Monica lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Lily's words echoed in her mind. She didn't want to be a burden to her parents, but she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The emotional toll was becoming too much to bear. Finally, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would tell her parents everything. She would no longer suffer in silence. The next day, after another grueling and humiliating practice, Monica returned home and found her parents in the living room. They noticed the look on her face immediately, the exhaustion, the sadness, the frustration. "Monica, what's wrong?" Sarah asked. Concern etched across her face. Tears welled up in Monica's eyes as she looked at her mother and father. She took a deep breath and, with a trembling voice, began to recount everything. The constant humiliation, the harsh comments, the feeling of being singled out. Sarah's expression turned from concern to shock, and then to anger. "He did what?" she said, her voice rising. "How dare he treat you like that?" Michael's face was dark with fury. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice firm. "We're not going to let this slide. Tomorrow, we're going to that academy, and we're going to have a word with this Mr. Walters." Monica looked at her parents, feeling a mix of relief and fear. She was glad she had finally told them, but she was also terrified of what might happen next. Would speaking up make things better, or would it only make things worse? But deep down, she knew she couldn't keep quiet anymore. She had to stand up for herself, and with her parents by her side, she felt a spark of hope, a glimmer of strength that she hadn't felt in weeks. The next morning, Sarah and Michael were up early, their faces set with determination. Monica, still exhausted from the previous day's events, watched them prepare with a mix of anxiety and relief. She had finally shared her burden, and now her parents were ready to take a stand for her. "Monica," Sarah said softly, sitting beside her at the kitchen table, "we're going to talk to Mr. Walters today. We'll make sure he understands that what he's been doing is not acceptable. You deserve to be treated with respect." Monica nodded, her eyes downcast. She wanted to believe that things would change, but a small part of her was still afraid. What if Mr. Walters didn't listen? What if things only got worse? Michael noticed the worry on her face and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to face this alone, sweetie. We're with you every step of the way." When they arrived at the Ballet Academy, the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. Sarah and Michael marched straight to the administration office, where they demanded a meeting with Mr. Walters and the school's principal, Miss Davenport. Miss Davenport, a woman in her 50s with sharp features and a businesslike demeanor, greeted them with a strained smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I understand you have some concerns." Mr. Walters is on his way." Moments later, Mr. Walters entered the room, his expression stern and defensive. He didn't even bother to greet Monica's parents. His eyes went straight to Monica, a thin line of annoyance forming on his lips. "Let's get to it," he said curtly, crossing his arms. "What seems to be the problem?" "The problem," Sarah began, her voice trembling with controlled anger, "is that you've been singling out our daughter, humiliating her in front of the class, and treating her unfairly compared to the other students." Mr. Walters raised an eyebrow. "I hold all my students to the same high standards," he replied dismissively. "If Monica can't handle the pressure, maybe this isn't the place for her." Michael's face turned red with anger. "High standards?" he retorted. "We've heard the things you've been saying to her, telling her she doesn't belong here, making her repeat moves until she collapses. That's not high standards. That's bullying." Miss Davenport looked from Michael to Mr. Walters, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Mr. Walters," she interjected, "we've had complaints before about your approach. Perhaps it would be best to discuss this calmly and professionally." But Mr. Walters wasn't backing down. "If you want your daughter to succeed in this world, she needs to learn discipline," he shot back. "I'm not here to coddle anyone. And if you think she's being treated unfairly, perhaps you should take a closer look at her performance." Monica's heart sank at his words. She felt small and helpless. But seeing the determination in her parents' eyes gave her the strength to speak up. "I'm trying my best," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "But you never give me a chance. You're always so much harder on me than on everyone else." Mr. Walters rolled his eyes. "Maybe it's because I see potential in you," he said sarcastically. "Or maybe it's because I expect more." Sarah slammed her hand down on the desk, unable to contain her anger any longer. "That's enough," she snapped. "You don't get to belittle our daughter and hide behind some excuse of high expectations. You've been targeting her, and we won't stand for it." Miss Davenport, sensing the rising tension, quickly stepped in. "All right, everyone, let's take a breath," she said. "I think it's clear that we need to investigate this further. Mr. Walters, I'm going to have to ask you to step down from teaching Monica's class until we've had a chance to review the situation." "What?" Mr. Walters exclaimed, his face flushing with indignation. "You're taking their word over mine." "We're not taking anyone's word over another's," Miss Davenport replied firmly. "We need to ensure a safe and supportive environment for all our students. Until this matter is resolved, I'm removing you from Monica's class." Mr. Walters glared at the Williams family, his jaw clenched tight. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth, "but you'll regret this." As they left the office, Sarah and Michael felt a mixture of relief and unease. They had taken a stand, but they knew this wasn't over yet. They had managed to remove Mr. Walters temporarily, but there was still the investigation to come. Monica walked between them, her head held a little higher than before. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt a small spark of hope reignite within her. She wasn't alone in this fight, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The days following the confrontation were tense. Monica continued to attend her classes, but the atmosphere in the academy had shifted. Word had spread quickly about what had happened, and while some of the students and parents supported Monica, others whispered among themselves, questioning her motives. "Maybe she just couldn't handle Mr. Walters' style," one parent said during a meeting. "He's tough, but he gets results." But there were also voices of support. Lily and a few other students who had witnessed the bullying started to speak up. "He wasn't just tough," Lily said to a small group of parents and students. "He was unfair, and he treated Monica differently from the rest of us." The investigation by the Academy's administration took longer than expected. But in the meantime, Mr. Walters was replaced by a new instructor, Miss Martinez, who was known for her nurturing yet disciplined approach. From the first day, it was clear that her style was different. She gave constructive feedback, encouraged all students, and created a positive environment where everyone felt included. "All right, Monica," Miss Martinez said one afternoon, smiling warmly. "I've heard a lot about you. Let's see what you can do. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about progress." Monica felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. She performed the routine she had been practicing, and while she made a few mistakes, Miss Martinez gave her helpful pointers rather than harsh criticism. "Good job," she said after the routine. "You've got potential, Monica. Just keep working on it." Monica's confidence slowly began to return. She no longer dreaded going to class, and she started to rediscover the joy of dancing. She even began to make new friends, like Emily, a quiet but friendly girl who shared her love for ballet. As the investigation came to a close, the Academy held a meeting with all the parents and staff to announce the results. Miss Davenport stood before the crowd, her expression serious but resolved. "After a thorough investigation," she began, "we have determined that Mr. Walters' behavior towards Monica Williams was indeed inappropriate and discriminatory. As such, his contract with the Academy has been terminated, effective immediately." A murmur of reaction spread through the crowd. Some parents nodded in agreement, while others looked surprised, or even dismayed. But for Monica, it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Furthermore," Miss Davenport continued, "we will be implementing new policies and training programs for our instructors to ensure a safe and inclusive environment for all students. We want to assure you all that this Academy is committed to fairness, respect, and the well-being of every child." As the meeting ended, Sarah and Michael hugged Monica tightly. "We did it, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You stood up for yourself, and you made a difference." In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere at the Academy began to shift. Miss Martinez continued to foster a supportive environment, and students like Lily and Emily felt more comfortable speaking up when they saw something wrong. The Academy's new policies created a sense of unity among the students and staff, a feeling that they were all in this together. Monica, with her renewed confidence, continued to excel in her classes. She even participated in an upcoming recital where she danced with grace and strength. As she took her final bow, she looked out at the audience and saw her parents, Miss Martinez, and her friends cheering for her. But the most surprising face in the crowd was Mr. Walters, standing in the back. He watched with an expression that was hard to read, but there was something different about him. After the performance, he approached Monica and her parents. "I just wanted to say," he began, his voice unusually soft, "that I've been doing a lot of thinking. I was wrong. I let my own biases affect how I treated some of my students, and I didn't realize the harm I was causing." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "And now?" she asked. Mr. Walters nodded. "I've started taking courses on inclusive teaching. I'm trying to understand where I went wrong, and I hope to do better if given another chance somewhere." Monica looked at him, unsure of what to say. "I'm still angry about what happened," she said honestly. "But I hope you mean what you say, and that you really want to change." Mr. Walters nodded. "I do," he said quietly, as they watched him walk away. Monica felt a strange sense of closure. The journey had been painful and challenging, but it had also brought about real change, not just for her, but for the entire Academy. From that day forward, Monica continued to grow as a dancer and as a person. She knew that her story was a testament to the power of standing up for oneself and the importance of a supportive community. And as she looked ahead to new challenges and opportunities, she knew she was ready to face anything with courage, grace, and the unyielding support of those who believed in her.